You are watching the Tim Kreitz Adventures channel. Welcome.
Well, how's it going, everybody? Tim Kreitz here, W5GFO. If you watched the video that I made just a few days ago, the motorcycle video where I was riding all four of my motorcycles in one day, at the end of that video I promised that the next video would be ham radio related, and there's a specific reason for that. I did a video several years back during the pandemic that was about coming back to ham radio and building a simple 100-watt station that talks around the world. I'll link the video below. I've been licensed since '97 as an amateur radio operator and was very active between '97 and maybe around '04, somewhere around in there. And then I got away from it. Always kept my license, but during the pandemic in 2020 in particular, I decided, you know what, I should probably dig that ham radio gear back out and see if it still works. Well, it did work, and I started having a lot of fun with it, and it took my life over. I went back, got my upgraded to extra class, and have been going 1,000 miles an hour in ham radio ever since. Well, that video sat on the channel for, I don't know, a pretty good long time with a respectable number of views on it, 6,000-7,000 views. And then all of a sudden the video has blown up. It's got tens of thousands of views on it, and it's one of my most viewed videos right now. And people are leaving comments on that video as if I just made the video yesterday, not 3 or 4 years ago. So I thought I'd better do a follow-up to let people know that thanks for all the advice on upgrading my station, but it's kind of upgraded. It's sort of ridiculously upgraded in a way that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever to anyone but me, but it's the way I like it. So this is an update video to that video. This video will be linked in the comments section of the original video, and the idea is that if anyone is tempted to give me some advice on what I can do to upgrade my station next, they'll see this link to this video showing several years later what my station is like now and how I'm running it. So let's take a look at all of this stuff that, as I said, makes no sense to anyone but me, and I'll tell you what all I've done to the station in the past few years. It's no longer a 100-watt station, it's now a 500-watt station. I'm using more antennas. We'll get all to it. All right, well, let's start with kind of a wide-angle shot here and show you everything that comprises the station, and then I'll tell you how the signal is routed and what I use everything for. On the left over here is a bunch of old Kenwoods. There's a TS2000 that's about 20 years old. It's the one that's on. The one directly up above it up here is the very first ham radio I ever owned. I've kept it all these years. Thank goodness I didn't get rid of it. It's a Kenwood TS130S, and then down below are a couple of tube hybrid Kenwood TS520s, a 1973 TS520 on the bottom and a 1977 or 78 TS520S just above it. There's also a Kenwood loudspeaker there and a power supply for those two radios up there. And that's basically that side of the station with the exception of my little ID52 there. We'll talk about that too. A computer for logging and spotting DX and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. You eventually will end up needing a computer in your shack if you don't already. On this side, there is a bunch of stuff. This stuff right here, this is an Ameritron ALS 500 amplifier, solid state. This is the power supply that runs the amplifier. This amplifier is hooked into the TS2000 over on the other side. Over here, I've got an ID5100A that I use for VHF and UHF and for D-Star. We'll talk about D-Star as well during this video, maybe if I don't forget. And then I've got an ICOM IC706 that's overclocked, if you will. It does about 120 watts on 10 meters, and so I use it as a 10-meter radio because my amplifier is not tapped for 10 meters. This is a power supply basically that runs everything over on this side. This is the FT450 that you all saw in the original video, and I'm using it mainly just for CW now. And then above it is a full legal limit power roller inductor and I have basically everything tied into it with a switching system we'll go over, and this is a 2-meter tuner for the TS2000's 2-meter output, which I use to work satellites. All right, that is a basic overview of everything. 6 HF rigs, an amplifier, various power supplies, some VHF, UHF stuff, and like I said, it makes sense to no one but me. But here's how I use it. Let's go through everything. All right, let's start with the old Kenwoods. I won't go into a great deal of detail on them, but suffice it to say that neither one of these old tube Kenwoods worked when I got them, or at least they didn't work correctly. And that in and of itself, talking about everything I had to do to these transceivers to get them to work right, is another video in and of itself. Maybe I will do that, maybe I won't. There are some other channels here on YouTube that have already done Kenwood repair videos way better than I ever could, and so I probably won't go into a lot of detail on that. But this one right here, this is a 73-ish, 74-ish Kenwood TS520. I think by the serial number I've pretty much got it nailed down to late 1973. That was a gift from a dear friend of mine's estate. He was a ham radio operator, and he passed away a long time ago, actually. And his kids and grandkids hung on to his house, and only a couple of years ago decided to finally sell his house. They had to clean it out during that process, and they found a bunch of his ham radio gear, as you might imagine, which he had not used in a bunch of years because he had been in ill health. I got several things from that hoard, if you will, of stuff. They tried to give me everything, but I couldn't possibly take all of it, and I'm very appreciative for what they did give me. But when I saw that 520, I knew I was taking that, and so I brought it home, and as I said, getting it working after it not being used in many years and being stored improperly, that's a whole other video in and of itself. But that radio works as good as it ever did new now. That was a labor of love project, and it'll swing about 130 watts on the low bands, 40 and 80. I don't go to top band. I only use 40 and 80 on the low bands, and so I use it quite often there. In fact, it's tuned for 40 meters right now. The one right up here above this, I did pay money for it, but I only paid $75 for it. It came from, as you might imagine, the radio hoard of another ham radio operator who I did not know, who passed away. He and his son were both ham radio operators, and this was the son's radio. It had a variety of problems as well. Suffice it to say, I got it working. It doesn't do as much power as this one. I think the tubes are a little bit softer in this radio, and also I've discovered this one has a slightly microphonic exciter tube, and that needs to be changed, but I've got tons of tubes for these. Anyway, these are fantastic radios. You get these radios or you don't. You love them or you don't. These old hybrid boat anchor radios, they have a fantastic sound both coming and going, and I absolutely love using these radios. Enough said about the old tube Kenwoods. Let's move up to the top two Kenwoods. This Kenwood was in the original video as well on how to build a station. It somehow or another, after all these years, still swings 100 watts. There's not a thing wrong with it other than the fact that this meter light is out, and I probably should change it, and you can get into it pretty easily. Take the hood off and then take the front panel off, and then that kind of pops right out. But I think I may wait to do that until this bulb goes out, because now that the past few years since I've been using this radio a lot, and it's mid-1980s Kenwood, that bulb will probably go out pretty soon too, so I'll just wait, since this is a highly visible meter, and change them both at the same time. Another fantastic sounding Kenwood. I don't think Kenwood ever made a radio that didn't sound incredible. And I think Kenwood only makes one radio now, and it's a very expensive radio, but I'll stick with this stack of old stuff because it all works. Brings me down to, let me get the shadow off of this. This is TS2000. This is another one that was basically given to me because it didn't work, and I kind of have it working. In fact, it works 100% everywhere, except that it has an intermittent problem that I cannot seem to nail down. There's either a broken trace or a cold solder joint on one of the boards in there, and every once in a while it just dies. And you got to do a little banging and bending of boards, and it comes back to life. So I know it's either a broken trace or cold solder joint, but it hasn't done it in a while. It's been doing good, but I do have the hood off of it just in case I have to dig into it and start banging around gently or flexing boards and all of that sort of thing. This one has a lot of surface mount electronics, and I'm not entirely comfortable with dealing with that stuff because you really need a microscope and a steady hand to work with those tiny components. I may send this off for repair, for professional repair. If I can get that word out, professional repair. There's actually a guy here in Texas who's really good with Kenwoods of this era, and that's probably what's going to happen. The VHF UHF side of the Kenwood I use to work satellites, and it's going through the 2-meter tuner I showed you earlier, and it's driving a GP9, which I use for uplink. This little computer I bought for like $59 off of Amazon, and it works great for ham radio stuff. It's not good for much else. I'll go ahead and warn you right now. It doesn't have a lot of hard drive space, and it does not have a lot of memory, but it will do things like running N1MM. It'll do your logbook of the world stuff. It will, look at all of the DX spotting clusters, and it will program DMR radios, for example. It's one of the things I use it for. So for all of the basic sort of low effort software that you need for modern ham radio, these little Evolve 3 laptops are a good choice. I've had good luck with it. The battery did swell up and almost explode on it, so I took the battery out of it, but I don't ever use it portable, so I've just left the battery out. This is one of the most excessive purchases I've made since getting back into ham radio. This is an ICOM ID52A that I use for VHF, UHF, and for D-Star. It was $550 for a handheld. Keep in mind, all my other handhelds are Baofangs. I've got 2 or 3 UV5Rs, and I've got a 1702 that I use for DMR. And I think I paid $20 or $19 a piece for the UV5Rs, and I maybe paid $50 or 60, maybe $70 for the 1702 DMR radio. Okay, and again, here's the amplifier. I'll just show you kind of a close-up. The ALS 500M is a good amplifier for the price. I got a honey of a deal from a Masonic brother of mine on both the amplifier and the power supply. The power supply is an MFJ 75 amp switching. It's very quiet. It does a good job. And the ALS 500 will do close to 500 watts on the peaks, but I never drive it that hard. It is solid state. Solid state tends not to be as robust as tube, as many of you know, so I do not push the amplifier too hard. If you talk to me on HF and I'm running power, I'm exciting this thing with the TS2000, and I'm probably running between 300 and 400 watts most of the time. That seems to work fine. My antennas aren't fancy or high enough for me to run 1500 watts, and 400 to 500 watts seems to do the job. This keyer I have also had since 1997. I bought this from the same gentleman who is now a Silent Key, who I bought the TS130 from. In fact, I bought them as a package deal. And it's been a great keyer. I've used several since I come back to ham radio, and then I decided to dig this one out and get it running. And I've actually been more happy with this than I have with a few of my others. It's your classic 422 with a pace setter on it, and it works great for me. It's bone stock, and I'm running it into the FT450. And FT450, I don't do more than 100 watts for CW, and so it works great for that. I don't do 400 or 500 watts on CW. That's kind of defeats the purpose of CW in a lot of ways. 50 amp power supply runs all this stuff on this side. This is the radio I was telling you about that I use mainly for 10 meter. I traded an old export radio for this, and the guy I traded it for had already done a bunch of mods to this, including overclocking the power section, if you will, and so it does well over 100 watts. I keep waiting for it to blow up, but it doesn't. It's doing quite well, and so as I said, it's mainly a 10 meter radio. I've got it on 10 megahertz right now because I was synchronizing a watch. All right, this is the King Dookie. This is another excessive purchase I've made since I've come back to a ham radio besides the handheld and the amplifier. This is a differential T roller inductor tuner. This is the MFJ 986. Also, I recommend this. This thing will tune a barbed wire fence. If you're into manual tuning, this is a good one, but I will warn you, it is MFJ, and they call MFJ mighty fine junk for a reason. MFJ is known for having excellent designs and poor quality control, and that was the case with this one when I took it out of the box. When it arrived, the antenna selector was broken and I had to fix it. It was just the knob, but the set screw inside was broken. It was stripped out and I couldn't, and it was flopping on the post. And so I had to fix that. So chances are if you buy something like this from MFJ, it may arrive broken. You can choose to send it back, or if it's fixable, fix it yourself. But again, a really good company that knows how to do really good designs, but their quality control sucks. Also, MFJ 2-meter tuner, and that's what I use to tune my GP9 from the TS2000 for uplink to satellites. Now let's talk about how I switch and route all of this stuff. It's pretty basic, actually. The switcher on the right, the isolation switch with the 4 selectors on it, is a Delta 4, and I'm using it in reverse. And the reason I bought a Delta 4 is because I knew I was going to use the switch in reverse, and it's very important that if you're going to send radios in to a switch like this and one output to an antenna system, you need to make sure you've got good isolation, and the Delta 4s are very good at that. They're kind of pricey, but it's worth it. You'll stand a less chance of messing up another radio that's sitting on the same frequency as the one you're using through induction in the switch, or bleed in the switch, I guess I should say. All right, so you'll notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The middle is an output, even though it's supposed to be the input going out to multiple antennas. As I said, I'm using it in reverse. This is the Kenwoods. It's any of the Kenwoods other than the TS2000. So of the 6 rigs, as I said, I can have 4 hooked up at once. Right now I have the TS130 hooked up, but if I want to use one of the other Kenwoods, the tube Kenwoods, I simply switch that coax and it sends it in on number 4. Number 3 is always the TS2000 and the amplifier. And so, if I want to run the TS2000 on HF, that I select number 3. That's where it is right now. Again, this is the output that goes to the roller inductor tuner. This is the ICOM 706, and this is the Yaesu FT450. So I can select whichever radio here. It all goes out, goes to the roller inductor tuner, and then from there it splits out on one of 2 different outputs. If you're familiar with MFJ tuners, they've got a coax 1 out, coax 2 out, they've got a ladder line out, and they've got a dummy load out. So I'm using coax 1 and coax 2. Coax 1 goes to my vertical dipole, which is exactly the same as it was in the previous video. Coax 2 output goes to this antenna box, and it is connected to 3 antennas. I have a loop on ground receive antenna, the same 40-meter half-wave dipole from the last video, and now I've also added an 80-meter half-wave dipole. So that's how it works. I can switch between any 4 radios and any of the antennas. And that is how the shack is set up. It, as I said, is mainly set up so that I can run my old radios when I want to, when I can run some power when I want to. And mainly, I just like fiddling with all of this stuff, and I like to be able to have it hooked into the system as much as possible. And I'm having a blast with it. I'm absolutely having the time of my life doing amateur radio. And if you're interested in getting into it, I promise you will too. And it'll take your life over, and you need to save your money. Because this is not an inexpensive hobby. This is not an inexpensive technical pursuit. So go ahead and save up for your HF gear, because it's all pricey. And just real quickly here as we end the video, I will show you the antennas. What you're looking at right here is a loop on ground. I have recently built it. It is a 4-sided loop, 25 by 35 by 25 by 35. Those are the legs. And it's using an isolation transformer and 50 ohm coax. It is receive only. You do not want to transmit into this antenna. I assure you, you will mess up not only the transformer, but probably your radio. But this is an excellent receive antenna with really good signal to noise ratio characteristics. It's a very quiet antenna, and it's also great for shortwave listening, and it goes all around my backyard. This is the isolation transformer for the loop-on ground antenna. If you are interested in building one of these, and I highly recommend you do because they're really fun to play with and they're really cheap to build, I will link a very well-known website from the guy who came up with this loop-on ground design. I forget his call sign at the moment, and I apologize for that, but there will be a link below. These are great. You should build one just to have fun playing with it. Okay, so real quickly here, there's the GP9. It's actually a GP9 knockoff, but 17 feet tall. I've got it mounted to a roof mount. Here's the 40 meter dipole. Here's the 80 meter dipole. If we go up further, you can still see I've still got the vertical dipole there. And then I've got the GP3 up at the top of that taller telescoping mast. Pretty simple, pretty low profile, and these antennas do a great job. I have a small piece of property and I can't really do a tower or a beam, so I do dipoles, and half-wave dipoles work great for such a simple design. Here are some extras and some side projects that I've been working on. That's another amplifier. That's the amplifier I was using before I went solid state. The one good thing about this amp is that it was tapped for 10 meters, and I kind of missed that. But I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this. It's a good amplifier. It's just really old, an FL2100B. I've got an old Hallicrafters loudspeaker there. I have not restored that yet, but I picked that up for a song at a Swap Fest, and it goes with these two Hallicrafters SX62s from 1947 that I picked up. This one works. I got this one working. I'm just not sure what to do with it now that I got it working, and I used parts out of this one to get this one working. This is my buddy's radio. This is a friend of mine's radio. I'm not sure where he got it, but he wanted me to look it over and see if it works, and it needs parts. That's it. Bye.